Hello and welcome to the Bald Ambition podcast. I'm your still very bald host, Mookie Spitz, and the one with the ambition today is Mr. Ramon Perez. He is Executive Director of the Digital Democracy Project. Thanks for making time, Ramon.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Mookie. And by the way, I'm working on being bald. I'm working on the ambition, but I'm also working on being bald too, so I can try to match your ethos.
Partners in the alopecia project.
Exactly.
I think since Michael Jordan, it started with Telly Savalas back in the day, and I'm a boomer Gen Xer.
Who loves you, baby?
Telly Savalas was the cool Greek guy on TV. He was Kojak. So that kind of warmed people up to this bald thing.
Bald is beautiful.
Went over the top with Michael Jordan. After Michael Jordan, if you were bald and a man, you had pretty much no problems.
That's right. Well, Bruce Willis helped.
A little bit as it started creeping up on him. So I want to officially welcome you to the...
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Party. Yeah. Embrace.
The Bald and Beautiful Club.
Yes. Embrace the inevitable, Ramon. And you have embraced the inevitable based on your aspirations for the Digital Democracy Project. And as I understand it, you have put together an amazing, dynamic, interactive experience for American voters to get some of the transparency usually denied them throughout our legislative and electoral process. I had your partner in crime, Tom Joseph, on the podcast a couple weeks ago. He's with America's Main Street Party, and he's developed an application analogous to yours in certain ways, where voters are able to participate in the nomination of primary candidates in their district. And we had a lively conversation. I understand you're partnered with him on that project as well. But your day job seems to be digital democracy. Right. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so the Digital Democracy Project, the concept is quite simple. Why should we have to wait every couple of years to have a say in our government? Why can't we use technology to create like a Netflix of government on demand, where what we do is we're using some really cool new technologies, in our case, mobile voting software, which is built on blockchain and the latest encryption techniques, from a company called Votes, which is VOATZ, which has been used for military voters overseas to cast an absentee ballot in situations where they have a hard time getting something through the mail. And I was a military officer myself for many years, and I had been deployed during elections. So I immediately, when I found out about them, I recognized the challenge of being able to vote during an election. From if you're in a submarine under the water, it's kind of hard to get a piece of mail in and out. And I said, well, geez, if you can verify people against the voter file, have them do a selfie scan that matches their photo ID, the same way you would do for, I guess, PayPal and Venmo and your bank. A lot of technologies use this now. So if you can verify that this is a real human being, they're on the voter file, they have a government issued ID, they're a U.S. citizen, they're resident of the state, then and you're able to guarantee that the vote that's cast is the vote that's counted, with all the, putting the votes on blockchain and recording that in a way that makes it unhackable and all this. If you can do all of that, then why should we have to only participate once every couple of years? So we created this project back in 2022. We started testing it in 2023. We went live for the Florida legislative session, where we take the bills that are being debated and put those into the mobile app. We let people who are, we started with Florida, so they were registered Florida residents. They could vote, quote unquote, on the bills the same as their legislators. The inputs get provided in real time and published on the app, on the website and in the app. So legislators can see what their districts want from them. And legislators have some confidence that these are real people in their districts. So they get inputs before they have to go take a tough vote in the Capitol. Legislators like the fact that it's basically like free public polling, which they would pay a lot of money for, typically 30, 40 grand in an election cycle that they would have to pay to poll their districts. So they don't do it very often. And they also like the fact that we're verifying identities because they get, honestly, I've spent enough time in Tallahassee and in DC and other places that thousands of emails a day come into any given legislator's inbox, and they have no idea that these are real people. There's so much AI generated email content now that they just for the most part ignore it because they don't trust it. So the idea is for legislators, they got some veracity. They know that these are real voters in their district. So that's the basic premise, is going back to first principles and matching voters and their legislators, giving voters a chance to actually weigh in on the process at the critical point where a legislator is going to cast a vote in the Capitol on the same bill. But the payback, you can see the payback, the benefit for legislators, as I described. But the real payback to voters, I think, is that at the end of the session, we then match what the voters wanted in the app to how the legislator behaved on the floor on the same bill. And every legislator gets a scorecard, just like a baseball card, and it just says, here's what the district wanted. Here's how the legislator voted. How often across all these bills, hundreds of bills that we've carried, how often did the legislator vote consistent with their district? And then you get a ranking to see, which legislators are the most responsive to their district. So I think that's where the real value is for the voters. They can go in November in an election and have some real data to work with. They can say, this person says he's representing us, but how often is he actually doing what we ask him to do, and decide whether or not to keep him in office or replace him with somebody who can do better. So that's the idea.
That's an amazing concept. You've got it in play. If I understand it right, let's take a step back and benchmark that against the current and mostly ubiquitous reality of how voters vote. So I'm a voter, and when it comes time to vote for my candidate, I go to the voting booth and then I make a choice. Now, this person is voting on bills. I rarely, if ever, see a bill. I rarely, if ever, understand really what they're voting on and why. So that's problem number one. And problem number two is, even if I did, let's say I had some vested interest in a particular bill, I'm not even quite sure how they vote for it. Are they true to their promise that they made to me, who have that vested interest in voting in that particular way? So right now, in summary, the entire process vis-a-vis legislation and my own candidates even being representational for my interests is opaque. I don't really know. I read the newspaper. I doom scroll online. Even with all of our technology, I have limited access to the machinery of government. Correct. And what you're doing is making it open. It's not only making it open, but you're enabling me to be an active participant in it. Right. So I could see the bills that are voted on if I've got it right. And then I can understand what's being deliberated. Then I could vote on the bills. This is amazing. I'm not just voting for my representative, my candidate of my party, but I'm actually choosing how I land on particular pieces of legislation that they're considering. Correct. And then it tallies that total. It informs the politician, I'm assuming, as to how the electorate sits. And it's not just Republican, Democrat, Independent. It's all voters in that district. And then they go and then they vote on that same bill. And then I get to see how they voted.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I think that there are a couple of things that we're hoping to accomplish. One is we want greater transparency in the process. Like you say, it does feel obscure, even knowing what our legislators are doing. And oftentimes we only hear about it through a biased media lens, where depending on where you get your news source, maybe you'll get a readout of what happened in your state capital or in the federal government. Very little from local level, municipal, school board, that kind of thing. And it's biased. So you're going to get what those journalists tell you they think is important, which matches your predilections most likely. We're hoping to take away some of that media bias. The other thing is the algorithmic bias of getting your news through your chosen social media platform. So we're hoping to take away some of that bias and give you a non-biased representation of what's actually happening in your legislature, what your representatives are doing in your name. But also we have been truly amazed with what AI can now give us in actually reading and summarizing what's in the bills themselves, because these bills can be 1,000 pages. Some of these big omnibus bills in DC, huge, one big beautiful bill, for example, tons and tons of stuff in there. So it's discombobulating, if you will, for the voters to even understand the legislation and what it does. And we've incorporated AI very heavily throughout the entire project to help us summarize legislation. We have a chat bot that you can interact with, where you can ask detailed questions about the policy, that tries to go beyond what you can get from a Google search or a ChatGPT conversation, because we load in the text of the bills so that you can say, okay, like section 234, what does it actually do? And get like almost turning every citizen into a legislative policy analyst. That's what's so cool about these technologies, is that it really lowers that barrier to entry for us. It lowers that information asymmetry problem for us, so that we can be more informed about what our representatives are doing and have some agency in the process. Because I think we've often felt like we are so disconnected that we have a system that is no longer responsive to the voters. We have this sort of Byzantine system for how we choose our representatives, where there's an enormous amount of gerrymandering involved in the process, the party primary system. It's a two-party system. You have very little choice by the time November runs around. 90%, 92%, I think, of U.S. House seats are already baked by the time a November election comes around, because the party primary is determined who's going to win, not the general election, because of the way that the maps are all drawn. So we feel like we have no real agency in the process. And our hope with our project is to give people back that sense of agency, of ownership over our democracy, of understanding that, yes, we do have the tools, we do have the brain power to engage in this process. We have the tools, we have the technology, and we have the desire to take greater ownership into our system of government. And that's what we're hoping to do, both as an educational tool and as a political innovation.
Digital technology, especially communications technology, has empowered the individual like never before. In medicine, you have the e-patient movement, where patients were Googling up their health information or their own symptoms, and then they were going into the doctor's office. So the paternalistic system of healthcare evolved into one focused more on the individual, which led to its own healthcare personalization. It democratized healthcare to a certain extent. And now you're using the digital democratization of the individual through that personal empowerment to democratize democracy through digital, which is making it more transparent, getting the voter more actively involved at more touch points. And to your point, it's a two-way street. So candidates, empowered people within the government see how voters want to vote. They see what the overall consensus is in their district in ways that polling might not even be able to do, because this is down to the individual bill level. And lastly, you're educating the public too with this AI technology when you read a bill, bill number 83556-22117, all the
Right.
legalese and the
Mm-hmm.
bureaucraties. What the hell does
Mm-hmm.
this actually mean or do? And oftentimes they're all lumped together. They're so complex. So to sort that out and empower the electorate that way. So I think this is a wonderful resource.
Well, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. This project would not have been possible even 5 years ago because, for one, the Votes app is built on blockchain, very recent technology. It's the fact that it's been used in real certified elections now. They've had about 5 million people cast ballots through this technology in the U.S. and Canada and Mexico. Um, so that is foundational to what we're doing because we have to be able to trust that the people participating are actually in that district and they're not robots and they're not deep fakes and they're not foreign actors trying to manipulate some legislator to do something. So that's really critical. But then, at the beginning of the project, when we started beta testing this in 2022, it was before ChatGPT had been released, and we had policy analysts who were reading the bills and writing summaries to try to make them approachable to the general public, and that was incredibly time consuming. And now the speed at which we can generate those summaries and provide those tools is 10 times greater because of AI. And we still have a human in the loop process just because AI can make mistakes, it can hallucinate. And we also want to make sure that it's, these are esoteric pieces of legal language. We do want to make sure we have complete control over what we put on the screen so that if it says X, it actually says, that is coming from the document and not something it invented. So those are key things. But those things make this possible in a way that it would not have been possible before. And I also think that AI will be the front end of the internet going forward. I think a lot of people are increasingly going to go talk to their selected chat tool as a way to find information because it's just a more oftentimes enjoyable experience to just be, I have a query. I don't want a massive amount of information. I want an insight. I want an answer, and I want to be able to have sources and citations so that I know where that information came from. But I don't want to spend ages and ages trying to source this information myself. So I think that's where another key innovation provided by a project called Open States has been really important to us. They go and actually scrape the content from all the legislative websites so that we can get a database filled with every vote from every legislator on every bill, which otherwise people, everything we put on the screen is stuff that you could find if you went to congress.gov or if you went to the Florida Senate.gov or whatever, you could find it, but it's not easy. They don't, and oftentimes it
Who
feels
does
to be,
that?
it
Nobody.
is not, yeah, it is designed by lawyers and lobbyists for each other. It is not designed for us. And unfortunately, that means that it's very challenging to figure out how did your legislator vote on a given bill. Was it the motion to amend? Was it the motion to advance? Was it the first reading on the floor? Was it the second reading on the floor? I mean, all of these things, the language, the coding of lawmaking is not for us. It is for lawyers. And that means there's a high barrier to communicate what the actual impact of the bill, to the point where even journalists have a hard time, even the journalists who track legislative politics, and there are very few of those left. So this is the other issue we find, is that where in the past in Florida and in all our state capitals, there used to be a lot of the major papers would have a correspondent who was posted up there in the Capitol just covering the sessions, and those people are all gone. There are very few left. And so we're now having to rely on these tools to give us sort of basic information that we used to rely on journalism for. So it's fortunate that we're at this confluence of technologies at the same time when the demand for a more open, more accountable, more transparent government is greater than we've ever seen. I just think I think people are yearning for a new way to do this, and clamoring for a way to be involved in a process that feels very opaque and inaccessible.
You bring up a great point that transparency is only one side of this. You could make all the data transparent, but if there's a petabyte of data and it's confusing, then how does a voter process this? So when you bring
Mm-hmm.
transparency and mash that with artificial intelligence, then the machine learning is able to process that in a way that's intuitive. To your point, it bubbles up the insights and the key takeaways. It personalizes the information in really effective ways. And it makes this 1-2 punch particularly effective for democratizing democracy through exactly
Right.
that, making the info more transparent, making it more intuitive and actionable. And in this process, the first sector in the economy that has taken the bite from AI seems to be your policy analysts and writers. And poor Steve Kornacki on the big board. We love Steve Kornacki, but essentially he's doing a machine learning analysis of the states, of the districts, of the election. And I think we'll always love the Steve Kornackis, but you can't always afford your own Steve Kornacki. So in lieu of that, you've got ChatGPT or Claude to process some of this stuff for you, the Geminis of the world. And I think that that's a brilliant way of approaching this. And it makes us all more free and more empowered. There's less hidden,
Mm-hmm.
less shadiness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Corruption loves opacity. And at the
Right.
same time, we're all more empowered. And it does so in a way that doesn't demand, to your point, that we're a lawyer, that we're an electoral expert, and we're familiar with the intricacies of the legislative process. You don't have to be.
Right.
What does the user experience look like? I mean, how in depth is this process? And can I just download an app and get going once I'm authenticated? Can you describe a little
Yeah.
bit
So
what that user
I can
experience is like?
share. Let me share my screen with you. I know that this is an audio, but we're also on YouTube. So for those who are on YouTube, you'll get to
We'll
see it.
talk
For
it
those who
through,
are
folks.
audio,
If you're just
yeah.
listening while you're making your ravioli in your kitchen or cleaning your car.
Absolutely. I will. If you are just on audio, you can go to digitaldemocracyproject.org and you can see everything we're describing here. But I have pulled up on the screen an example of a bill, one of the bills that we carried, which was obviously high profile, called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, HR1, which was over the summer last year. So the way it works for us is our legislative tracking team will figure out which bills are working through the committee process and are likely to make it to the floor vote so that we can put those into the app with enough advance time that people can participate prior to it coming to the floor. Now, that's a bit of art and science. We don't load every single bill in the world because there are just so many. In Florida legislature, there are about 2,000 bills that get drafted every session. Only about 50 to 75 will actually get a vote one way or the other on the floor. I think I read that we've actually expanded to 7 states for state legislature, and we're doing federal bills. So anybody in the United States, by the way, can vote on federal legislation. For state legislation, Massachusetts, which is one of our most recent additions, they draft about 8,000 pieces of legislation and only vote on something like 20 or 25. It's a very low percentage that actually make it through the process. So a lot of the art here is trying to decide what gets loaded. But of course, the ones that are high profile, like One Big Beautiful Bill, are definitely going to get loaded because they're taking up a lot of media discussion. We put it into our system. We get a summary of the bill. You can, of course, link to the original source text and see the entire bill if you want it all. This one has 1,118 pages. If you were so inclined, you could see that. But did I lose? I lost my sharing. My apologies as I did that. But we also try to source which organizations have taken a position on a bill. So we show that here. You can see we give some impact statements. Vote yes on this bill if you want to do X. Vote no on this bill if you want to do Y. And here are some organizations that believe in this bill, support the bill. Here are some who oppose the bill. And a little bit, you can link to those organizations and get more details on those organizations and why they might support or oppose this bill and what other bills they support or oppose. That we find
You
people
seem
think
nonpartisan.
correct. Our goal is to be nonpartisan. Yeah, we are providing a platform. It is ultimately up to these organizations will take a position, but we don't take a position. We just provide a platform and information to the voters.
And when you say voter, I just want to clarify voter. When you're using Ramon's app here, you're not actually voting on the bill like you're a legislator. You are expressing your opinion as to your preference as to whether this bill should or shouldn't pass. Is that correct?
Correct. That's
okay.
Right. You can think of it as advisory voting.
Yeah, or in a sense, polling.
Polling. Yeah.
It's like polling. It's like you raise your hand, yay or nay, on each piece of considered legislation that gets tallied, and the voters within the Capitol building get informed with your app.
Correct. And we're a nonprofit organization. We don't charge for this. We don't charge people to participate. We don't charge legislators for the information, which is a distinction because polling companies they're for-profit companies, and there will always be a need for that because they're providing a lot of sort of statistical alchemy to help you understand if this is a representative sample of the population. Our goal is not to elevate some people and sort of suppress the inputs of other people in order to get to the kind of a representative sample. Our goal is to get to scale. We want everybody to be able to use this and sort of replace the need to write an email to your legislator or call the switchboard. You can come through this as a more modern approach where we can validate your district for the benefit of the legislator so that they can actually use the information to inform their decision making.
And I see on screen, and for people on the audio, you've got the big, beautiful bill here, and then it looks like you've got the AI summary, pro and con.
So there are, exactly. So we provide some pros and cons that are based on the text of the bill. What does it do? And then we allow people to kind of crowdsource this knowledge and add additional what they think are pros and cons about a piece of legislation. So they can add to the discussion, and they can rank how closely do they think each pro or con actually matches their point of view, or how factually based is it, that kind of a thing. We then you can vote on the bill. You click on this link. You can actually vote in your browser now, which is a new addition to this. Votes started as just a mobile app, but you can do mobile and web, so you can get verified in the Votes election software and vote on this bill inside your browser. And then as people are voting on a particular piece of legislation, we can see the breakdown of how people are voting here on the screen. And we can also zoom into our respective states, and we can see how people are voting by legislative district. So give that a second, my broadband, here we go. And we can see how people are voting based on their district.
You've got the big board here on your own app, on your own browser.
Exactly. The benefit here is that a legislator can just look at this and be like, oh, okay, well, I can see how many people in my district have this opinion. And because often for the big high profile bills, they kind of know how they're going to vote. But the bills that are, especially the ones that split the party, they actually don't really like to take a tough vote. They don't like going into a situation where they don't really know what their district believes on a given piece of legislation. So a lot of them, especially on bills where it splits the party, they find that really useful. But then I think the value to the voters is we can show each district and we can show what the voters wanted, and then we can compare it to what the legislator did to see if they match. And that gives us the ability to produce these scores at the top that show how often did the legislators match the voters on this particular bill. And then we can also do the same with a particular legislator, like I mentioned earlier, kind of like a baseball card. You can just click on a legislator and say, for all the bills we've carried, which has been a bunch, hundreds at this point, for all the bills we've carried, here's what the voters wanted, here's how the legislator voted, and here's how often they match. So that then you can kind of take a look at how closely do legislators do what their districts are asking them to do.
By asking what their districts are asking them, is that in a nonpartisan way or a partisan way? Is it just an aggregate of their district?
It is simply majority rules. It is, what does the majority of the
Okay.
people in this district want? Now, we do intend to roll out a new version of the scorecard where we can kind of weight a legislator to their party, let's say. So let's say, now, one thing we have to be cautious about is that it is a secret ballot. This is real election software that's being used for binding elections. So we cannot see how a person votes. We don't know that Mookie voted yes and Ramon voted Y, or voted yes or no on a particular bill. All we can see is that Mookie is a verified voter in this district, Ramon's a verified voter in this other district, and then how they vote is up to them, and we have no influence on that, and we have no ability to see that. And that's intentional by using real election software rather than just a traditional database. We're guaranteeing that privacy.
That's the essence of the blockchain technologically as well.
Yes, it's there. The voters' details are encrypted as it goes onto the blockchain so that we can provide an aggregate result for that district, but we cannot track you as an individual voter and see what you believe.
It's like
And what I
buying and
think,
selling crypto. You know who you see the transaction and you see the
Mhm.
overall data, but you don't know who's buying and who's selling.
Right. And I think the interesting byproduct of that, Mookie, and what we've seen is that we very quickly start to see the left and right constructs start to fall apart. You'll see people voting not as individuals, but when oftentimes we would carry multiple bills, let's say on the same day. Some of them are very like what you might call left leaning, or maybe they're sponsored by Democrats. Some might be sponsored by Republicans. What you'll end up seeing is no necessarily clear pattern where people might support a bill by a Democrat and a Republican on the same day, on the same batch of bills as they go out into the app. I find that really fascinating, and in fact, it shows from the the first principle of why we are doing what we are doing, which is that this concept of left and right is an entirely artificial construct. It's been forced upon us by a two-party system. It is not how people think about the world. People really make these decisions based on their own lived experiences, their study of society and philosophy and arts and culture, and how they believe the world should progress, and they make these decisions based on their own opinions about policy. And it's completely reasonable that somebody might be pro-gun Second Amendment on one hand and also support universal health care. And that is, for a human being, it is perfectly reasonable to have that point of view, right?
If it's reasonable, if you give them the transparency and an
Right.
intuitive and direct understanding of what the actual issues are. And you
Yes.
get to an awesome point, which is our polarization and the train wreck that's become of American politics, and to a certain extent our overall culture, has to
Mm-hmm.
do with the opposite, which is opacity that's
Yep.
created by media dynamos' interests basically in clickbait,
Mm-hmm.
and this lack of a clear, intuitive understanding of exactly what the hell we're talking about.
Right.
So if you
Right.
empower the electorate with these two things, then they're naturally going to gravitate toward distinct issues instead of aggregate party platforms, which, to your point, are arbitrary and based on control, manipulation, fundraising.
That's exactly right. And I often make the case that, if we had a 7-party system, the media would talk about things as if there were 7 points of view. But because we have a 2-party system, the media sort of talks about as if there is a left and right to every concept. But that is really not true. In fact, I think that's why we're seeing so much um, dissatisfaction with the system that has led to record high numbers of Americans becoming independents or non-party affiliates because they feel like they're stuck with this lesser of two evils choice come election time. And actually, we still talk about a two-party system, but the reality for most voters is that they live in a one-party system. 80% of Americans live in a one-party state where one political party owns all 3 branches of that state government. 90% of Americans live in a congressional district that is so heavily gerrymandered that it is completely uncompetitive, not within 5 percentage points in a general election. So the primary determines who's going to win the general. So for the vast majority of us, we live in a one-party system, not a two-party system. Our choices don't exist. And if you're a registered independent in some states, like in Florida, where I'm registered, you don't even get to vote in a primary because it's a closed primary state. One of the last, I think, 10 or so states that still has a closed primary system. So we have an illusion of choice, but most people have checked out of the process because they have realized that for all practical purposes, there is no choice in who we elect as our representatives.
Yeah, and with knowledge comes power. And as Uncle Ben told Spider Man, with power comes great responsibility. And you
Mm-hmm.
are empowering individuals with information, raw data, presented in a way that's very intuitive and actionable. And you're enabling them to become part of that process. And at the same time, on the other end, you are making legislators and elected officials more accountable for their decision making on all of these bills, which eventually become the law of the land. So I love everything about this. And like great ideas, there's a host of issues. So
Mm-hmm.
the first one that comes to mind is the implicit bias of your results. And by this,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got early adopters who are very self aware, they're technologically savvy, and they're most likely already actively involved, more so than average, in the political process. So,
Mm-hmm.
all the results that you're getting have to do with this artificially segmented portion of the population. And I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if you factor that in, is it biased your results? And is there a way, obviously, you want to disseminate the app to encompass more of the general population,
Right.
but I'm getting kind of a Silicon Valley feel to this, that, the hipsters are fist pumping Ramon and expressing their opinion. And meanwhile, most people, who are uninformed or disempowered aren't really getting their vote across.
Yeah, so I think you bring up a great point. We've heard this from a lot of folks because obviously the early adopters, you are correct, have been organizations that we connect with, other nonprofit organizations. So in the League of Women Voters has been amazing because they're highly respected, they're nonpartisan, and they've been introducing us to lots of people and hosting conversations where people can come learn about what we're doing. Other organizations that we've connected with who get people involved in the app and on the website obviously have a point of view. The Chamber of Commerce tends to align more so with Republicans, pro-business. The Citizens Climate Lobby, which has been interested in working with us, or the Sierra Club, tend to be more progressive, like on environmental policies, things like that. So they do have their points of view, and they will promote Digital Democracy Project to their own people. And so you're right that the early adopters will be people who come from that lens. But one of the things that, in fact, if you don't mind, I'll share my screen again because I'm very excited to. It's almost like you teed this up very nicely for me because we've recently rolled out a tool that we're always trying to find ways to lower this barrier to entry. That you don't need to be a legislative policy wonk or be closely affiliated with these bills to get good understanding of them. So we've rolled out this tool we call VoteBot, which is a chat bot that sits on our website and allows you to just have a conversation to learn more. So let's say we're talking about one big beautiful bill again. Maybe you heard something on the news about food stamps. Okay, so you say, how does this bill affect food stamps? Okay, and now it's going to dig into the bill itself. Now, again, this is 1,000 pages, right? So it's going to dig into the bill, and it's going to give you this summary that says key changes to SNAP payments, thrifty food plan adjustments. Sorry for the folks who are only on audio, but for those who are on YouTube, you'll see what it's spitting out is a bunch of pretty detailed responses to how the bill would change how food stamp payments get made. It adds work requirements. It has certain age requirements for people who are single or for women with children or for people who are pregnant, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a level of detail that you're not typically going to see on social media. You won't see it usually in ChatGPT or Perplexity because we preload the bill text itself so that you try to get as close to ground truth, right? And it's got the sources, it's got citations. So we're really excited about this because we really do worry about the point that you're making, which is how do you make this as easy as possible for people to interact with, to lower that barrier to entry so that you're not biased by people who already have a very high understanding of legislative policy and of where these bills are in the committee system, and they've been tracking it already anyway, and they just basically want their people to go and influence the results so that they can influence some legislator. What you really want to is make the information as easily consumable as possible so that we really can try to achieve greater scale, and with scale comes that kind of representativeness that you really do have the wide swath of people.
And you could call bullshit on the media, and you can call bullshit on politicians. So this idea, well, politicians all lie. Well, go vote bot it and check it out to see if in fact people with food stamps are better or worse off. You can call bullshit on claims that are made that the bill either does or does not contain this or that proviso. And that is in and of itself an incredible resource too.
Right. And so our hope is that we can provide just enough education tools that even for individuals who don't necessarily want to get in and verify in the app and vote on a bill, they can at least learn more about what our government is doing in their name. Because I do think it's important for us that people come back to this sense that we own the government. We are not bystanders in this process. This government still is a government of the people, which means that we hire representatives to do our bidding. And if we don't do a good job of understanding what they're up to, we can't hold them accountable. So we're trying to give better tools. And I think this technology allows this in a way that is truly, I think, revolutionary. We've never had the ability to completely cut out so much of the bias and noise and really try to get back to ground truth, reconnect voters with their representatives as we do right now because of this technology.
I love it. However, bringing up another point, there's a movement, especially given the current administration and the guy at the helm, of skepticism with regard to everything digital related to voting. Now, I know your app doesn't vote. It's basically a polling and tallying and information resource and elected official accountability tool.
Right.
I get that. But it's still digital. It's still an app. And there's still information flying out there to Venezuela. Right? Who knows what's going on that blockchain, right? So how do you address this countercurrent of skepticism vis-a-vis digital, which to me is analogous to the vaccine hysteria, which is 200 million people have been saved from polio, so let's stop vaccinating. I'm not saying it's rational. I'm just saying that it's pervasive.
Right, right. I think that we try to handle that in a variety of ways. One is the choice of technology partners. So, votes as a software product has been implemented by both Republican and Democratic supervisors of elections in the states in which they've operated, um, and in Canada and Mexico. But obviously, if we're talking predominantly the United States, it has state ramp certifications in several states now, has done tons of independent audits. Uh, they're, they had in 2020 did a hackathon where they, the hackers found some elements that made it into the New York Times, and it got people scared of mobile software in general. Obviously, they've done quite a lot of work to 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 fill all the concerns of the hackers, and then went through a state ramp certification and auditing process to make certain that all those gaps are now addressed, but continuing onward to bug bounties and things like that to address new gaps, some of which are introduced by Apple or Google as 0-day problems. So
no system is foolproof. There's like no drug doesn't have side effects. So you're
right,
always going to have certain vulnerabilities, which is
right.
also an issue for digital
Yeah, the
systems.
other way we try to address it is in our governance. We chose to be a nonprofit organization rather than a for-profit company, um, because we want to establish a system of trust. And we have a board of directors that is made up of Republicans and Democrats and libertarians and forward party and independents. And in our board reflects the broadness of political opinion in society. Um, we we are intentional about not taking positions on legislation. We've had endorsements from dozens now of sitting legislators and legislative candidates of all political stripes. And so if you go to our supporters page, you'll see that actually the early endorsements came from Republicans in Florida who really liked the tool as a way to just hear from their districts. Because again, to them, it's free polling. So it's like, it's clear. They're like, hey, if I don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to get this insight from my district, that's great. So we had early support from a bipartisan group of legislators in the Florida House and Senate who put together an appropriations package for us in the Florida legislature, pushed it all the way through the budget and got it approved and into the Florida legislative budget. So I think that showed that this truly does. I mean, it is bipartisan by design. We have tried to be intentional in that approach because I try to tell my team that we're not here to build a product. We are here to build trust, because we're not going to solve this problem with technology. We have to solve this problem by showing people that there is a way to use technology to have greater agency, greater accountability. But we have to do that in a way that people can trust what we do, and that that trust will take a lifetime to build and it can take seconds to destroy. So it's something we are constantly trying to be aware of in everything that we do in our messaging and who we affiliate with and how we organize, and just in our technology choices. So I know that there's no perfect solution to what you've described, but I think that if we can engender that trust and if we can maintain that trust, then over the course of time, people will begin using the tools and they'll lose that fear of it. They'll just see, I'm voting on the app. Oh, the results show up on the screen. I can see how many people voted on this bill and what their result, what people thought. And I have some confidence in the approach. And I think you build that trust with time.
I'm blockchained into anonymity, which is, I
Right.
think, an important aspect.
Right.
Who pays your bills? So, speaking of trust and
Mm-hmm.
objectivity and a truly bipartisan, multilateral kind of approach, who you don't have to be specific, but
Yeah,
how
sure,
did you
sure, sure,
get
sure.
off the ground? Who sponsors you? And if people want to
Right.
contribute and actually help you out based on everything you've described, what's this like?
Yeah, so this is a community project. We We take donations through our website. We're an all volunteer team, actually. So we are developers, organizers, legislative policy folks just committing their time for free to this project. So we would love to have people who have an interest in this reach out to us. You can email us info@digitaldemocracyproject.org. You can go to the website, you can make a donation, you can sign up to volunteer, because we believe that it's going to take all of us to solve this problem. This is not a problem that Silicon Valley is going to solve. This is not a problem that Washington's going to solve. This is a problem that all of us together are going to solve. And I think that in terms of who pays the bills, it is us. We pay our own bills. We, the members of our board of directors, and myself, I've worked in AI and machine learning for the last dozen years. I've had the fortune to be in a hot industry, and I was able to kind of use some seed money to get this project off the ground. Members of the board have cut large checks to help this out. We've had individual donors cut large checks, but actually the money predominantly comes from small dollar donations, $20 from a bunch of individuals through the website. I mean, it's almost like Bernie Sanders talks about $27, so, but that is kind of how
or
it
like
is.
Larry David, the underwear on the radiator. but in all seriousness, I absolutely love it because it gets to, in summary, the heart of solving problems that are solvable and using available technology to do that. Heightened transparency so that nothing remains hidden and that people are better educated. And then provide that information in two ways, in ways that's intuitive and easy to understand and actionable, and empower individuals to participate in that process to get their voice heard, not only as a vote in the voting booth for the politician, but on a bill by bill, policy based, incremental, discrete faculty like that. And then to hold the politicians accountable with the information that comes back. Did you really represent the people you were elected to represent?
Right.
I love it, and I think it's what we're seeing into the future, which is, Claude is destroying SaaS companies right now. And I think the way we do elections needs to be similarly deconstructed and reconstructed in this kind of way where it's all about information. It's Steve Kornacki's big board coming into the palm of everyone's hand with the added power of interactivity and personalization. Love it.
Yeah,
we will put your awesome organization in the liner notes below. If you got $20, toss them Ramon's way. Go download the app and have fun with it. And let's democratize democracy through the Digital Democracy Project. You rock, Ramon. Thank you. And comment, share. And welcome to Bald Ambition. This is a kind of ambition that really benefits all of us. So bravo to you and everything you've done. And I hope it catches on to all 50 states. All 51 states. All 51 states. We're going to need Canada to
Well, I will say to any American voter listening, you can get verified in the Votes app and vote on federal bills right now. And our ambition is to be in all 50 state legislatures by the end of this year, so that by the time next year, you can vote on state level legislation. And we would love we are formulating plans to get us to local levels, so you can vote on municipal issues, you can vote on your school board rezoning and all sorts of different things. We really want to bring this technology to widespread use at every level of government.
Yeah, and I see it percolating up to the federal level too. And then as you demonstrated with added transparency, I want to see how the whole nation is thinking and feeling about these issues.
Absolutely.
Bring it on. Thank you, Ramon.